Medical malpractice. That's the topic of our next presentation, presented by Deb Godsey, who's an expert on medical malpractice law. I don't know how to say that, but she's an expert on this subject. So come on up, Deb. Please welcome Deb Godsey.
We'll have to clarify that. It's nice to be here this afternoon. After hanging around with Dr. Waltering for darn near 21 years, a lot of you caregivers, professional folks, patients have become household words to us, so we feel like it's kind of an extended family here. But I do need to clarify, I am not here to give legal advice. That is not my area of expertise, and I am not an expert in the law. Where my expertise comes in is taking a medical record apart and looking at that record from start to finish and being able to tell you what's missing, what's in that record that shouldn't be in that record, and just write a maybe 3-page synopsis for an attorney that tells them what's wrong with that record, what mistakes are in that record that might give you a chance to have a malpractice case. I am not here to give legal advice. What I'd like for you to take away from this today is some little known, well, they're not little known, they're easy to find facts, but things that aren't always discussed. And if you think you have a malpractice case, some things that are your responsibilities. This is, once again, let me say, it is not for legal advice. Okay. Medical malpractice. Professional negligence by act or omission by a healthcare provider in which the care provided deviates from accepted standards of care. Now, what are standards of care? You Google standards of care, put in a diagnosis, you can find standards of care for almost any diagnosis in the world. And there are many, 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 many books written. Even for neuroendocrine things, the Europeans have established, correct me if I'm wrong here, they've established a standard of care. There's one here in America. I'm told it's kind of useless at this point because it's so cumbersome, but there are guys out there working to get a standard of care for your carcinoid patients. So you will, at some time in the future, have a published form of your standards of care. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way. What you need to know, those of you who may live in one state and get care in another state or go to Germany or some of these places for treatment, is that your standards of practice vary by country, and they vary even in this different areas of the same country. Who is the plaintiff? The patient or the legally designated party acting on behalf of the patient. In the case of a wrongful death, that plaintiff may be the executor of the deceased estate. Whoops, I keep doing the wrong thing. Defendant. Healthcare provider. It usually refers to physicians, but it may be nurses, therapists, dentists, whoever has provided care for you. Now, this is the part that I want you to take home with you, the elements of a case. There are 4 elements, and that plaintiff or that patient or that designated party has to be able to prove through his attorney these things. That a duty was owed. A legal duty exists whenever an organization or healthcare provider undertakes the care or treatment of a patient. You have to prove that that duty that healthcare provider took was breached, that the provider failed to conform to the relevant standard of care, and that breach caused injury. Damages. You have to prove damages. Without damages, there is no claim. So you, your attorneys, that paralegal that works for your attorney, that nurse consultant who works for that attorney that you may hire to help you with this, has to prove all of these things. I'm thinking about this point, you might want to go to Beau Rivage down the Mississippi coast, try out the Sweetheart package, and see if you still feel the same way tomorrow that you really do have a case here. When you've established all 4 elements of this claim for negligence, you may have a successful medical malpractice claim. But it's up to you. And here we go again. You have to prove all these 4 things, and you got to do it within a certain time frame. There's only a limited amount of time that you have to do this. Each jurisdiction is different. Each state is different. Psychiatrists are held to different standards than medical doctors. So there's a lot of things to be thinking about when you start to look, do I have a malpractice claim? Limitations. You can go to Google, everybody does it, put in medical malpractice statutes of limitations, and then you'll get the listing of 50 states. You can click on that, and after you read those different ones, my gosh, I live here, but I got my care over here in Louisiana, and then I went back home to New York and saw Dr. Warner, but I'm taking phone advice from, Dr. Wallen in California. So there's a whole lot of things to look at when you start thinking about a malpractice. Your head will be spinning when you're through. In New York, you got about a 30-month limit to a claim. Foreign objects left in a body 1 year from the time of discovery. Injury that occurred to a minor 3 months past the 18th birthday. You might want to go to Bermuda, $239 and think this over at the Princess Fairmont. Just take yourself to the beach, de-stress yourself, think about what's coming next. In Louisiana, statute of limitations is really different there because we have a lot of the Napoleonic Code things into effect. 1 year from the time the damage was discovered. Most physicians in Louisiana pay into what's called a patient compensation fund, which limits the amount of money that you can receive from a malpractice case to $500,000. The physician has to pay into this fund, and they're personally responsible if the claim is brought through and found valid for the first $100,000, and then the fund takes over at that point. Damages. Without damages, there is no basis for a claim, regardless of whether the medical provider was negligent. Likewise, damages can occur without negligence, for example, when someone dies with a fatal disease. So this damage thing and statutes of limitations can really hang you up. So you might think about going to the beach in Puerto Rico, 4 nights for $439 per patient, and that's with airfare. Might be cheaper and less stressful unless you know you can prove all of these things. Here's some facts that a lot of people don't take into consideration when they start a malpractice claim. 72% of all cases are denied compensation. That means that there's quite a few attorneys out there, 28%, who are going to take your case on the chance that you're going to get money. The average compensation, $521,000. But of that $521,000, 54% of the compensation is going to go toward attorneys and court fees. 10% of the cost of medical services is linked to malpractice lawsuits and more intensive diagnostic testing due to defensive medicine. So we're looking at all costs going up because the doctor is prudent. He wants to make sure that there's nothing out there that he's missed because he's worried about lawyers and torts and statutes of limitation. Another fact is about emergencies. The law recognizes that a healthcare provider is just like anybody else. He can make errors in judgment in an emergency. Therefore, a healthcare provider's conduct in an emergency is evaluated in the light of whether it was a responsible choice under the circumstances, even though in hindsight, another course of action might have avoided the injury. So once again, we're kind of talking in double languages. I looked to see how much it would cost for 3 nights at the Marriott in Maui, $495. Might be a good choice. If you want to look for some place that can help you go through a medical record or go through it for you, you can Google the National Alliance of Certified Legal Nurse Consultants. Here you will find a list of nurse consultants by specialty, in other words, OBGYN, long-term care, medical, pediatric, whatever, and it also tells you what state they're in. And usually when you take an exam for that certified nurse consultant, you have to declare the state where you think you're going to practice so that they will know, what's really going on in the state where they're practicing. And you can look and see where they are and their specialties. So I'm thinking that before you go on a malpractice hunt, that you might want to go to the beach somewhere. Think this over. Because the burden of proof is clearly in your court and that of your attorneys and paralegals that work for you. You need to consider the expense You need to consider the time out of your life. You need to consider the stress it's going to bring to you when you're very ill. Going to drive up that substance P, which is not going to help you. Going to drive up that serotonin, which is not going to help you. And most importantly, do you really have a claim? Because most people do not have a medical malpractice claim. Now, I'm not here to tell you if you think you have one, not to go for it. You have to do what's best for you and your family. But there are people out there who can help you. But before you start down that road of medical malpractice, you really need to know ahead of time, do you have a case? Thank you very much.